Tori,
Papa.
if you sniff the spice bush, you need to sniff the other extreme.
Yeah. You sniffed it too,
Cucumber.
so we got to share.
Okay, what I've got here is a leaf
Thank you.
of the pawpaw.
Ooh, this
Now
smells
the
good.
pawpaw was named by people that really didn't know how to pronounce papaya. And it is a close relative of papayas. I can't even say it. The pawpaw leaf looks a lot like a lot of other plants. Smell is
like
really good to use to identify things. So the spice bush, think you could recognize it, you know, if you crush the leaf now? Well, pawpaw has a way to identify it by smell too.
Smell like
And if you
cucumbers.
smell the spice bush, it is mandatory that you smell this, you know. If you get the bad, get the good, you need to experience the bad as well. The smell of this reminds me of the blue smoke that comes out of the back of a vehicle that failed its inspection. Okay? But the pawpaw plant gets to be about a 10 to 15 foot tall tree. Here's a little baby pawpaw right here. And they have a little fruit about this big, and it tastes like heavy custard. As a matter of fact, most people make a mistake of biting too much because it is so loaded with flavor it'll overwhelm you and you'll go nibble it or dilute it, and it is good. Yeah. It's also called poor man's banana. You might want to let these boys by. I don't think they want to walk through the mud. So, pawpaw. There was a couple of guys that made a trip out west, and they were wise enough to take along a little Indian girl, Sacagawea, and several times she saved them from being very hungry. One of the times was in September. They didn't get much to eat except pawpaws. She brought them up and said, this fruit, eat this fruit. They were very happy with that for a while. So the first 2 weeks in September is when you look for the right pawpaws. And the pawpaw plant is also the only food for our state butterfly. Our Tennessee state butterfly is a zebra swallowtail, black and white striped butterfly. Its caterpillars only eat pawpaw leaves. So if you don't have pawpaws, you don't have zebra swallowtail. But I have a story for you.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I heard from David Cuzio that there was more antioxidants in one pawpaw that could last you for an entire year.
It's a good point, and I've heard that said many times by nutritionists, that if we could domesticate pawpaws and produce them for everybody, we would be so much healthier, because the pawpaw fruit is loaded with all sorts of healthy stuff, antioxidants and so forth, vitamins and minerals. So pawpaws are excellent, healthy food from the woods. But no one has been able to devise a way to store them or to grow them domestically. Only rich woods seems to be their habitat. Now here's another plant that you can eat. It has 3 leaves. This is poison ivy here. This 3 leaves here is another plant that we commonly call Jack in the Pulpit. And it has a flower, a little tube that comes out and has a little hood, and inside there will be little spadix, so Jack inside the pulpit, you see. And my predecessor at this job of being the statewide naturalist learned the hard way that this plant has another name. So if y'all can endure standing there for another 5 or so minutes, I'll tell you the little story of how he learned that this was called something else. See, he was on his way to Chattanooga to give a slideshow about nature. And on his way down, he had all day to get there. So he decided to stop and go for a hike on the Fiery Gizzard Trail on the Cumberland Plateau. And he was down in there so long that before he realized it, his time was out. He was going to be late anyway. All day to get there and still going to be late. So he decided, well, I got to get out of here quick. I go back up the trail, it'll take me an hour. If I climb up the side of the mountain, that rocky side of the mountain, and get to the top, I can get on the road and get back in half an hour. That's what I'll do. So he climbs up the side of the mountain. What he didn't realize was on top of the mountain between the gorge and the road was people's houses. So he climbed up the top, came out into a backyard in his uniform. And there was a lady sitting in a chair on the back porch. Saw this guy in a uniform coming out of her backyard. She stood up and yelled at him, "Hey, you! What are you doing?" He said, "I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm the naturalist. I'm trying to get to the Langford Road over here to get back." You know, he explained it all to her. She lightened up and said, "You study plants, huh?" I guess to test him, she said, "Well, there's a dandy plant right there. You know what that is?" And he said, yes, ma'am, that's a Jack in the Pulpit, but I'm really in a hurry. Can I go now? She said, yeah, that's the right name for it. But there's another name, too. It's called Indian turnip. Really, he says, I've never heard that. You mean you can eat the root? Oh, yes. Indians used to eat it all the time. Really, he said. Curiosity got the best of him. So he says, can I dig this one up here? She said, yeah, go ahead, look at it. So he dug it up, come up with a tuber, hold it up. Can you eat this? Again, she says, yeah. So he bit into it. Instantly, he felt like his mouth had just been set on fire, burning and burning and burning. He spit it out, and he looks up, and she's laughing her head off. So he looks over to the side, and there's a water faucet. So he rushes over to that water faucet to try to wash this awful stuff out of his mouth. That was the worst mistake of all. Because the roots of the Jack in the Pulpit contain concentrated oxalate crystals, which are activated by water. He now feels like there's a needle into every cell of his mouth, and he's in severe pain for several minutes. And he keeps looking up, and the lady keeps laughing her head off. When he finally gets it all spit out enough to talk to her, he's thinking, I guess I'm not going to make it to Chattanooga because I want to kill this woman. But I shouldn't do that. So he just asked her, ma'am, why did you do that? That was one of the most painful things I've ever experienced. And she leans forward and says, well, young feller, if you hadn't have been in such a hurry, I'd have told you you had to cook it first. Cooking breaks down the oxalate crystals, and it is edible after. Jack in the Pulpit or?
And in turnip.
Let me out of the swamp.